What we're going to be covering is some novel techniques on how to do geolocation of an image and why you might want to do it. And there's actually a twofer. We're going to be covering how to do things in daylight and then potentially how to do it at night. So, hi everybody, my name's Mick. I don't have a whole lot of time. I just run a consultancy, a SANS instructor, and I also am on the INS faculty. So with all that said, let's get started. I love doing OSINT. One of the things that's really cool is regardless of where you are on your tech journey, you can do OSINT. And what I'm going to be showing you, it's gonna sound crazy difficult. You know, you hear like using stars to position locations. It's not nearly as hard as you may think, okay? So what we're gonna be covering is how OSINT people use images. First of all, they're gonna be doing things like finding the people in the picture, doing identification. What we're going to be focusing a lot on is geolocation, and we're going to lightly dip our toes into when the photo was taken, which can also be a very cool bit of analysis. So these two things, where the photo was taken and when a photo was taken, are what I'm going to hope to arm you with as a result of this talk. Now, if there's metadata, if I have the file name, hell yes, I'm using it. I would never advocate that you use these techniques if you have to. This is a thing that I do when I must. So what I want to do is introduce you to some options that are out there. There's a lot of visual data, a lot of visual cues that we can use to figure out where the image was and be incredibly precise. And in some circumstances, I've worked cases where knowing exactly where the photo was taken was actually a very important bit of the case. So I know this sounds weird, but I'm a firm believer that every bit of things, all the stuff that you learn, it's all interrelated. And I actually stumbled upon this technique through a hobby of mine that my wife and I just love, and it's sailing. So that's a picture of us. Last April, we got our skipper's endorsements, and if you're ever in Central Ohio, come contact me. I'm Better Safety Net on Twitter. We'll go for a boat ride. Like there's not really great boats in Central, or not great lakes in Central Ohio, but you know, if you want to go sailing, let's sail. So one of the things that I'm working toward, though, and my wife and I are working toward, is getting our U.S. Coast Guard certified captain's license, and we'd like to be able to do actual very large ships. As part of that, you need to have, everything's about triple redundancy, and so if GPS goes out, you have to learn astronavigation. And everyone who's a recreational boater hears astronavigation, they're like, no, not for me, I'm out. They tap out. And more is the pity, because it's not actually that difficult. So it really isn't, and I know you're like, come on, nerd guy, you're kidding me. I'm not. What you're going to be using is a technology that comes all the way back from the 1700s. It's called a sextant. Now, sextants are actually not that difficult to use. They're a little fiddly, and we'll get to how they work in just a little bit. Before we get there, though, we actually have to go further back in history. We're going to be using a much older technology that we have written records from that go all the way back to 3500 BCE. And that is lines of position. Lines of position is a technique that's used both in nautical navigation and also land nav. The way a line of position works is it allows you to safely approach areas and know the angles of attack that you need to take. This is Elbow Key in the Abaco Island chain of the Bahamas. Really beautiful place if you ever get the opportunity to go there. The thing that's interesting, though, is if you're sailing, you can see how shallow it is on the approach. There is a very, very narrow approach that you have. This is a zoom in. Look at how small that channel is. That's a speedboat, to give you an idea of size, that got caught in the satellite image. So this is a very unforgiving approach. It is critical, if you don't want to beat your boat, that you approach correctly. Now, you can use GPS, but everyone, when you rent a boat, like charter a boat, and you're going to be doing Elbow Key, they give you a briefing on how to do this approach if your GPS fails. And the way you do it is a line of position. There is a lighthouse on Elbow Key. You can't miss it. The thing's the only large structure, and it's got this really brilliant candy cane paint job. And there's a notch in Elbow Key. You line those up, you know you're on the right approach. So when I was sailing there last October, I was approaching and I was like, oh, these aren't lining up, so I need to sail a little further north. And people were like, no, no, just approach, approach. And I'm like, I don't have the line of position yet. No GPS, it's instant. It's fall off the chair easy, it makes sense. So what we can do is this works for OSINT image analysis, and it works incredibly well. It's amazing. So what you can do is use lines of position to get within a few feet of where an image was taken. It's incredibly precise. And so because we're in Washington, D.C., I was like, oh, okay, let's look for a photo of D.C. landmarks. But I want to know where this photo was taken. So here's how I look at it now that I think in terms of lines of position. First thing, we've got that corner of the Lincoln Memorial. That lines up with the flagpole on the U.S. Senate on the Capitol. So, line of position. You then go to Bing Maps. By the way, don't laugh. Bing Maps, if you're sleeping on that, you are missing out. For real. Google Maps is great and all. Bing Maps actually has some really cool stuff from an OSINT perspective in terms of ultra-high resolution pictures. So I use Bing Maps for a lot of these sorts of things. Here's a picture of the National Mall. Now, I was zooming in and out when I was placing these lines, but here's how this works. That's the corner of the Lincoln Memorial that we saw in the prior picture. That's where the flagpole of the U.S. Senate is. You put your line of position. That's that. It's a little tedious, but my goodness, it works. There's a notch in the Capitol where you're going from the main Capitol entrance, like below the rotunda, to the Senate. I don't know the architecture term for it. That lines up with the edge of the Washington Monument. You got yourself another line of position. Put that on, here's the notch, here's the Washington Monument, that's another line of position. Now at a certain point, you will find that your lines of position that you're drawing might be too thick. So what I did is I just made them thinner, and then where they intersect, that's the likely shot or spot where the shot was taken, right? Now, what you want to do is do 2 or 3 of these and make your hypothesis of where the shot was. Then, if time allows, what you want to do is come back a day later and draw new lines of position, but I'm just going to show you how you would do this. You verify with more lines of position. Here, I've placed them, second column from the left on the Capitol, and then there's these statues that don't show up terribly well unless you have really high contrast. But the statues on the bridge also line up with those other landmarks, and you can get a very high degree of accuracy on where the photo was taken. Now, some of you might be saying, yeah, okay, that's neat. I politely beg to differ. Because now, knowing exactly where the shot was, let's say it's a daytime shot, I can go to suncalc.org and look at the shadows in that image and say, the shot might have been taken in this date range at this time, which that's baller. You're not just talking about time of day, you're actually getting a date range. And that's crazy cool. At night, for a night shot, you would use mooncalc.org. So you can use those 2 techniques together to get a very good fix of where and when the shot was taken. When I learned about suncalc and mooncalc, I was like, man, there's got to be a starcalc.org. There's not. So if anybody wants fame and glory, make starcalc.org. I'll help you. I'd love to see something like that exist. So let's get back to astronavigation. This bit blew my mind when I learned this. Astronavigation, specifically stellar navigation, using stars to navigate, it's not different than lines of position. And when I heard that, I was like, no, you're crazy. And they're like, no, it's not. Check this out. Instead of lines of position, what you're going to be doing are triangles of position. Here's how it works. You're at sea. You see a star. You know that the star is above the horizon because you see it. You also can see the horizon. You know what you got? Triangle. Then all you need is a way to calculate the degree of altitude that that star is above the horizon. And that's why we have sextants. That's what you do. You sight a sextant on the horizon, and then using different ones have different adjustment knobs, but you dial it, and this mirror will move until the star appears through the eyepiece as if it's on the horizon. At that point, you mark the exact time and your degree, and you have a very, very precise fix. So you just do a couple stars. 3 to 5 is best so that you can get high accuracy. And I want to be clear, a lot of people dog on this older way of doing things, and that's a big mistake. If you were doing, if you're very skilled, I'll own it, I'm still on my journey here. But if you're very skilled and you're doing it on fixed land and you have a clear view of the horizon, you can resolve your position to 500 feet, which is filthy. Now, I'm not there yet. Especially when I'm on a boat, I'm getting about 5 to 10 miles. But for many cases, 5 to 10 miles, I mean, that's putting you in the city. That's pretty freaking awesome. So I want you to start thinking about how you can start using the stars. Now, I don't want you to focus too much on the glitzy tech that I'm going to show you. There's a process by which you should go. I want it to make it be a very graduated experience for you all. And frankly, I don't always use the tech, and I'll explain why in a moment. First of all, star charts are your friends if you're going to do this. And one of the things that I've learned is that mariners are lazy. They really are. I mean, they work hard, but when it comes to doing the stuff like star nav, it's actually not that difficult. You would think you'd have to study a ton of astronomy and have a whole lot of knowledge on how to do this, and you don't. You technically only need to know 27 different celestial objects that are likely to be seen in your hemisphere. That's it. If you want to be good for the entire Earth, you have to do 56, I think. So there's these star charts that are available, and you simply, once you start sighting some stars, you can use this to see what the degrees and latitude they're at, and then using either like a mobile phone app or a lookup table, you will know exactly where you're at for that one fix. You add a couple of those together and you get very high resolution. And now, when I learned this bit, I was like, it's a lot easier than I thought it would be. And it is. So let's start doing this with images, okay? So in the real world, there's a couple problems that we need to talk about first. But it doesn't have to be horrible. There are tools out there that make life a lot easier. Now, these don't work great at sea, but for those of you who are just getting started, I'd like to introduce you to Stella Solver, which is a really cool application. Here, let me show you this. Whoops. Okay, this is Stella Solver. And the way it works is you will load an image. Pictures. So here, got a picture in some suburban setting at night. And then what you can do is you can start doing a thing called start source extraction. And what it does, oh boy, that got a little weird here. But what this does is this actually shows you the different stars that it believes it finds. And then what you would do, there will be false hits, like glints off of like an automobile, for instance. What you'll need to do is go through and delete those. And then once that's done, you then click this magic button here, Start Solving, and it starts trying to say, like, okay, this object is in relation to this nearest object, therefore this is probably the belt of Orion, you know, and it just starts grinding through this. I'm not going to hit the Start Solving because there's a problem in that it is computationally very expensive. So what I want to point out is this would be a technique that I would invest in if I've got a lot of time and I'm willing to make this like really work, okay? But the thing is, the results are not going to be guaranteed. And there's a couple reasons for that. Okay, so in the real world, there's some problems, especially if you don't have the luxury of being at sea or at a lake. Horizon will be hard to establish. So one thing that you need to bear in mind when you're doing this sort of work is that you're going to have to kind of accept that there's going to be a degree of imprecision. If you really want to, for those of you, I can actually, by the audience, I can see some of you are like, hell yeah, I'm going to get into this hardcore. What you're going to need to look into is how to establish artificial horizon. Come chat with me after the talk. I'll be here all the rest of the con. Other things to note is that unless somebody has a very nice cell phone, or especially they're like shooting in night mode, you might not even get stars. Okay, that's part of the reason that I wanted to talk a lot about lines of position, so that I was giving you something that would be immediately applicable, because this, it's something to have in your tool belt, but it might not ever come to fruition, especially if people are using a flash. The flash will blast out the weak light of a star, and so you get this pure black sky, and there's, you know, this isn't like the CSI shows where you can just shout enhance at the monitor a bunch of times and stars all of a sudden pop into existence. So these things might be intractable problems. What I'm playing with now, and those of you who, like, if this is whetting your appetite, I would love to start jamming with folks. Like, one of my favorite things about this community is that we love hacking on things together, is maybe adjusting the processing workflow. The math, while complicated, isn't that difficult. It's really just a fancy subset of trigonometry. And so those of you who have any development experience, I would love to work with you and collaborate with you on how to do this a bit better. Right now, the math is, it's elegant, but not optimized, if that makes sense. I would encourage you to really dive into suncalc.org. That is one thing that I wish more researchers and OSINT analysts knew about. Once you fix the position pretty well, you will be able to tell by the shadows of what's going on in a way that's really, really powerful. The same too with the lunar. Now, there are other tools out there. Stellarium and K-stars are planetary, basically like planetarium simulators. Okay, so this is K-stars. All right, so K-stars is a utility that allows you to simulate the night sky. For those of you who are wanting to play with K-stars or similar, there's a couple things that you may want to keep in mind while you're messing with it. Number one, these tools work best if you have at least an approximate understanding of where the image was taken, because the night sky will look different in different locations. Now, the cheat that I use for this on giving approximate locations of where the image was taken, I actually already gave it. Remember that star chart that I showed? That actually tells you which hemisphere you're in. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in the situations that I've been in, but there's been times where I'm like, hey, it's in the northern hemisphere, and people are like, really? I'm like, hey, that's better than I had before, you know? So I'll take what I can get. Then once I have the northern hemisphere, I'm gonna do things like use geo hints to look at other contextual elements in the clue to see, like, you know what, this might be North America. People are like, really, a continent? Again, I'll take what I can get. And then from there, what you can do is in your config, you actually change your position that you want to be in, and you drop it and take a look at the stars to see if they make sense. Little pro tip, one thing, and I'm not going to do it in this demo because it is a little fiddly, but this is a pro tip that you may want to consider, is most of these tools have the ability for you to adjust the magnitude of the star. And what I use that for is to basically dim out the stars that are low magnitude, especially in like urban or suburban situations where you're not going to see all the stars. Like this star field, you would never see this in an urban or suburban setting. And so this is like going to be distracting. If you dial it back, you have fewer stars, less work. Now, that's K-stars. Stellarium's not too different. One word of warning, most of the apps in this space are Linux-based, and the reason is that the libraries and dependencies that they have are pretty substantial. So one of the things that I will, in transparency, I haven't told them yet, but I've been working with Stephen Harris, who's going to be presenting virtually. I am going to be working with him on a VM. We started messing with this in OSINT VM a couple months ago, and I'm going to be putting these tools and these dependencies in there so that those of you who want to do this can. Now, getting started, if you're like, oh, Linux, I don't want to use it. Oh, don't worry. Here's the way that I actually do this. Go to like Amazon or any like science museum, and there's these star charts that have a wheel. Get those, because those will show you the most likely stars that you will see in your particular hemisphere. And this is another cool thing, it will tell you which season. Those of you who are like astronomy geeks like me would notice that in that one image that I loaded up briefly, you see Orion. That is a winter constellation in the northern hemisphere. So I know that it's a northern hemisphere and I know it's winter time, which again, I'll take what I can get. Those of you who are really wanting to go the life less ordinary down this and want an easy path, I can't stress this enough. Google or use whatever search engine and look for an honest star chart. It will take you to this celestiaire.com site, which is all about astronavigation, and they have this star chart that is cheat codes. What you're looking at are the navigational stars, and these lines are the sight lines that you're supposed to take to find the other star. The reason that this is a cheat is if you have this, or a chart like this, you no longer have to know the constellations at all. What you just say is, hey, there's the star. Okay, I'm going to take a guess, and let's draw like straight down. Oh, there's nothing there. It wasn't that star. And you just can brute force and solve the problem that way. Actually is surprisingly elegant and a real good cheat. Online, you can get this for like $20, and it's a giant, like 19 by 20 inch, easy to read thing. I can't say enough on this one. So that's what I've got. I'm expecting that there's going to be a lot of questions.